In 1939, on Adolf Hitler's birthday, one of his brightest young scientists, Paul Hartek, had a special gift in mind for his Führer. Hartek wrote a letter to the Nazi War Office. He wished to inform them that the latest developments in nuclear physics would make it possible to produce an explosive exponentially more powerful than conventional weapons. He was trying to give an atomic bomb to Adolf Hitler. But Hitler would never get his hands on a nuclear weapon. He had murdered, imprisoned, or exiled many of the great physicists in his territories, those who happened to be Jews or liberals, and many who were both. Exactly a month before the war began, Leo Szilard made a pilgrimage to the house Albert Einstein was renting on Long Island. The physicist who usually chauffeured Leo Szilard on trips out of Manhattan was unavailable that August day in 1939. So, Szilard enlisted the services of a fellow Hungarian émigré, a young scientist named Edward Teller. Persecution in Budapest sent him and his family to take refuge in Munich, where he'd lost his right foot in a traffic accident. In the early 1930s, Teller and his family were forced to flee once again. Just as Hartek felt it his duty to inform Hitler, Szilard wanted President Franklin Roosevelt to know the awesome power of such a weapon. There was no scientist on Earth whose prestige and influence was comparable to Einstein's. Einstein's nightmare was imagining Hitler with a nuclear weapon at his disposal. But what would be the long-term consequences of this dangerous new knowledge, which, once unleashed, could never be taken back? Einstein would take no role in the U.S. effort to build the atomic bomb, which became known as the Manhattan Project. But he did alert the president to the potential use of atomic nuclei in warfare. After the war was over, he told a reporter that if he had known the Germans would fail in developing an atomic bomb, he never would have signed the letter. But Edward Teller had no such ambivalence. He couldn't wait to get started on weaponizing the atom. The Russian physicist G.N. Flerov had tried for years to alert his leader, Joseph Stalin, to the possible military applications of a nuclear chain reaction. But the Soviet Union was under siege by the Germans, and an atom bomb project was likely to take years to complete. With their backs against the wall, it seemed too impractical to even think about. In 1942, Flerov had published a scientific paper on nuclear physics. Now, he was excited to see what the eminent physicists in Europe and the United States had to say about it. Flerov was puzzled. None of the physicists of the international scientific community thought his paper worthy of comment. At first, he was hurt, but then he realized what was really happening. The U.S. Department of War chose the remote location of Los Alamos, New Mexico, as the headquarters for the atomic bomb research project. It had been recommended by the project's director, physicist J. Robert Oppenheimer, who had recuperated there from an illness as a teenager. But for Edward Teller, an atomic bomb wasn't big enough. He dreamed of even greater lethality, a weapon in which the atomic bomb was nothing more than a match to light a fuse to the nucleus, a thermonuclear weapon, what Teller affectionately called the super. If Edward Teller had a polar opposite in this scientific community, it would have been Joseph Rotblat. Rotblat was born in Warsaw to a wealthy family who, like Teller's, had lost everything. In the summer of 1939, just before the Nazis invaded, he was invited to England to take a research position at the University of Liverpool. At the last minute before his departure, his beloved wife, Tola, had an emergency appendectomy. She was forced to remain behind until she was well enough to travel. Tola insisted that Joseph go on ahead to prepare their new home. It would just be a matter of weeks, she told him. The challenge was to find a chemical fuse that would light the nuclear chain reaction first imagined by Leo Szilard in London. The scientists and engineers told themselves that they would be averting a grave danger by building a bomb of unprecedented destructive power. Their government could be trusted. They would never use such a weapon in an act of aggression, not like those other governments. These atomic scientists were the first to see building nuclear weapons as a deterrent to using them. The fear of Hitler with an atomic bomb was the driving rationale for the Manhattan Project. And yet, when Germany surrendered and Hitler was no more, of the thousands of scientists who worked on the bomb, only one resigned. It was Joe Rotblat. In the years that followed, whenever he was asked about his decision, he always rejected any suggestion that he had done so out of moral superiority. He would just smile and say, the truth was that he desperately missed his wife, who had been prevented from leaving Warsaw and lost to him in the chaos of the war. With its end in Europe came his chance to go and search for her. But he never found her, except as a name on a list of the dead. Tola had perished in the Holocaust, exterminated at the Belzec concentration camp. Although he lived another 60 years, Rotblat never remarried.